And I did really well in school. So I thought, I can't possibly have ADHD. My mom's telling me that her ADHD was, can't understand math and is running around all the time. And I sit all the time and I love math. So, and it took me, being an adult and learning more about the actual clinical definition of ADHD to go, oh, maybe this is me. Maybe it just presents differently. And so I've been on Concerta for a couple of years now, and it's really made a huge difference in my quality of life.
Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, interviews experts like doctors, counselors, and life artists who give helpful tips on living a happier life. But most importantly, Bob interviews ordinary people who have suffered with a mental health issue. Each one has recovered to lead a much happier life. You can do it too. Bob's notes on today's show followed.
Meet Anneke Elmhirst, a very interesting person who deals with Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder and possibly some autistic qualities. Find out how she helps herself with her lack of focus and concentration. She also does virtual counseling for neurodivergent who can converse on the phone. Check out her website included in the description of this episode. Please enjoy the show.
Now, here's Bob with today's show.
Hello, Anneke. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
To start off, I'm going to ask you a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Anneke. I'm a relationship coach based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I specialize in alternative relationship styles like polyamory and also neurodivergence. And I'm an active member of both communities. I'm polyamorous and I have ADHD.
Okay, that's very good. And I just want to ask you first, your childhood, when you grew up, how was your childhood?
My childhood was a bit of a mixed bag, honestly. My dad passed away when I was 7. My mom had some mental health issues, but honestly, I feel like when you look at it on paper, besides those issues, it was pretty idyllic. I grew up on Cape Cod. I grew up, riding my bike around the cul-de-sac with my best friend who was born on the same day, my Astro twin.
Wow.
So I think that I look back on it overall fondly, but also with some definite sadness. Some definite grief for myself, who was just this, a small child going through so much.
Wow. Now, did you have any form of depression as a child, or that happened later in life?
I definitely was either depressed, anxious, or both. My mother suspects that I'm sort of on the autism spectrum, but I haven't gotten a formal diagnosis, so I don't necessarily claim that. I didn't get into regular therapy until I was in my teens. I had a bad experience with a family therapist after my dad died, and I just flat out refused to go to therapy until with, puberty and hormones and everything just got so much worse in high school that finally I went, okay, something's got to give. I'll try this therapy thing that people keep talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, especially when you start out. You're not on any medication, so you don't really know how bad it is. When I had it off and on my whole life, but when I was 33, I had a real bad attack where I was basically dysfunctional. I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't do anything. I attribute a lot of my anxiety, at least, maybe not the depression, but the anxiety, to ADHD because I have a lot of problems talking to people in authority or my peers sometimes. When I was a child, that was better, but later on in life, if it wasn't one-on-one, if it was a group, I had issues like anytime we would used to go walking and that person in the middle wouldn't talk to me. I was on the left side. The other person was on the right. So that's an example of what happens to me a lot of times. It's almost like I'm invisible. I'm 6'7", 400 pounds and invisible. So, I don't know if that happens to other people, but I wanted to bring that up in case it does. Could you tell me, what kind of symptoms you have as ADHD, possibly autism?
The two are crazily comorbid. Like, there's so much overlap. And as a really young child, I was the textbook definition of hyperactive. But then when I got a little bit older, maybe like 4 or 5, it was like a switch flipped, and I was hyperlexic. I was reading at like 3 or 4. But you couldn't get my attention if I was reading. My mom would, she would say she would be like, "Hey, Anneke, I want to go get ice cream," and nothing. And she would have to take my face in her hands, turn my face towards her and go, "Hey, Anneke, you want to go get ice cream?" "Oh yeah, sure, of course."
Would you say it was hyperfocus that you did with your reading?
And I sort of, I got better at managing it as I got older, but it still shows up in certain aspects of my life today. If I learn a new craft or something, I don't want to do anything but that craft. Even if if I plan to get together with friends, I'll still be thinking about it while I'm hanging out with my friends, which is something I enjoy doing. But there were other sort of, emotional regulation things that I don't know whether to chalk those up to ADHD, depression, just the fact that my dad was dying at the time. There's all sorts of factors interwoven here that I can't really pin down my symptoms to one thing or another.
Right. Okay, so would you say you had a severe case? Were you diagnosed as ADHD?
As a child, I actually wasn't. It wasn't until I was an adult that I thought maybe, because, so for context, my mom has ADHD and she has very hyperactive presentation of ADHD. And so I always thought that I couldn't have it because I wasn't hyperactive in the same way that she was. Whenever she would get faster, I would slow down. If she was running around the house, rearranging furniture and cleaning and whatnot, I would be absolutely static, like almost frozen, reading a book, trying to calm myself down because she was so amped up. And I did really well in school. So I thought, I can't possibly have ADHD. My mom's telling me that her ADHD was, can't understand math and is running around all the time. And I sit all the time and I love math. So, and it took me.
Yeah, I like math.
Yeah, it took me, being an adult and learning more about the actual clinical definition of ADHD to go, oh, maybe this is me. Maybe it just presents differently. So I've been on Concerta for a couple of years now, and it's really made a huge difference in my quality of life.
Oh, really? Is that like Ritalin, or is it more? It doesn't have any anything to make you hyper.
It's So I'm on some antidepressants as well, but Concerta is essentially extended release Ritalin. So I only have to take 1 pill a day rather than 2 because I kept forgetting to take the second pill, which is, people claim, oh, these ADHD drugs, they're addictive. I'm like, I can barely remember to take mine. Like, I don't know what planet you're living on.
So you take something along the lines of Ritalin and it does calm you down a lot? Or
yeah, it really does. It calms me down. It helps me to focus. I can feel the difference in the morning, an hour after I've taken it versus late at night when it's wearing off. I'm much more scattered. It's much harder for me to regulate. And I'm on antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication as well. And I think the combination of the two has really changed my life for the better.
That's great. That's really good to hear, because, this show's all about recovery. And I just want to prove how many people are in recovery and doing really well. So you do think there's a little autistic part of it?
I definitely think there's something, and it could be, it could be under the umbrella of ADHD. It could be the umbrella of autism, but there's something in terms of my sensory modulation, my desire for routine, my struggle when plans change. Like, there's all sorts of little idiosyncrasies and nuances that definitely point towards something not neurotypical.
Okay. And you actually treat people that are neurodivergent. Can you tell me a little bit about how you treat them?
Sure. So I start in behavior analysis and then realized that was not values aligned for me, because I wanted to understand people with autism and be able to communicate with them and enable them to communicate with the world. And the way that it's practiced right now, behavior analysis is very much about forcing people to conform to neurotypical behaviors. And that's not what I'm about. So I pivoted into coaching. And the way that I start out with all of my clients, but especially neurodivergent clients, is creating a space where everything is welcome. Everything is okay. And the most important thing is your needs. And a lot of people aren't used to that. They're not used to not masking. They're not used to they're not used to letting go of the reins a little bit. And so it takes a while to really get down to what's going to work for them.
Right. So would you say that you treat people that are severely autistic, or at any level you treat?
I can coach. I do my coaching over the phone. So my sort of cutoff line is my client does have to be verbal enough to engage with me over the phone. When I was doing behavior analysis, I worked with the whole spectrum. I worked with, teenagers who were in general ed, but having behavioral outbursts, all the way down to I worked in a residential facility for kids with really high support needs. We had a house of 8 kids, 12 to 21, who were nonverbal and needed help with all of their ADLs, et cetera. So I have experience all over the spectrum. But my coaching is focused on verbal responses.
Okay, that makes sense. I know I volunteered one time when I was living in San Diego, and all the people were pretty much nonverbal. I mean, they would repeat words and talk to themselves, but they really didn't know what was going on, and it really is a sad thing. But so you would consider ADHD for yourself as a non-issue at this point, or you still think you have a little bit of it?
I think it has gotten worse as I've gotten older, partially because, in high school, you don't have as many responsibilities. You don't have as much taking up your bandwidth. It's school, your extracurriculars, if you've got a job, and that's it. But you generally have a house to live in. Sort of as I moved up into management roles, it got worse because there was, for one, I was partially working from home. So there was no accountability and there was nobody to ensure that I was on track. I was on my own in that regard. So it got to a point where I was talking to my therapist and I just said, something's got to give. I feel like I don't have, I don't like the phrase self-control because I think we misuse it, but I did feel like I was internally very out of control and I had no idea how to rein that in. And so she said, well, we've agreed that you're probably ADHD. How about you go get a formal diagnosis? And I got lucky. The waiting list was a year and they had an open spot. So I got in within a month. Getting that medication, it improved so much for me that I went from thinking, oh, maybe I just have a smattering of ADHD to, oh no, I have significant ADHD. It's just that the medication also helps so much.
Right. And it doesn't make you nervous at all? Because I had a problem where I got super nervous, have a lot of anxiety.
I think that my antidepressants really help mitigate that.
Okay.
And I've never been one to respond badly to caffeine, so the stimulant medications do pretty well for me.
Well, that's terrific. I'm so glad to hear that you're a recovered ADHD. But on the other side of that, I like to think that ADHD is not really a disorder. It's more of a different way of thinking. And it could lead to disorders like depression, anxiety, things like that, where people like myself, they feel so like they can't do things that are simple. I know when I go to the airport, forget it. I mean, I talked to the lady, I'm an IT person. And I talked to her and I said, could you please just give me the ticket? Because I cannot go into a program that I don't know what it's doing and figure it out or remember it. Like most people just remember it. But I have a real problem with that. Knowing where I am, my sense of direction is awful. Like people in work would point to a direction inside the building and I wouldn't know where that was. I had no idea where that was. So I did talk about masking for 40 years when I worked in IT. I mean, these are all professional business people mostly. I did nothing but mask and pretend I'm something I'm not. I'm a very good actor and I'm very good at picking out what people do and how they do it. So I was able to repeat that and get much, much better. I mean, when I first entered the business, it was awful. I couldn't write a memo. I also have dyslexia. So there was just no way to write a memo. They laughed at my memos. So I had to get better with that. The first guy I worked with made sure that I asked good questions. And instead of saying, hey, what's that about this? And he would say, okay, slow down. Tell me exactly what the problem is. And he helped me be able to communicate later on in the career. But for 40 years, I was pretty miserable. It's not fun acting like an entire day, always on guard, always worried that somebody will find out. Somebody's going to find out I have this horrible thing. And I had no idea what the heck it was. Finally I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was about 45. And I had it since birth, but my parents were World War II parents and they had no clue about depression, anxiety, or ADHD. they just didn't think that, it was either you were okay or you were crazy. I mean, there were two extremes, and I guess they didn't want to think I was crazy, so they never really set me up for a counselor or anything. It took my sister-in-law to step in and say, this guy needs it. I mean, I had a bad OCD, and the rituals were horrendous. I'm embarrassed even to talk about my rituals because they were so bizarre and painful. So I attribute a lot of my anxiety, especially to ADHD. And I think ADHD is so much more important than the billing. Like a lot of people, oh, you got ADHD? I had that too. Okay. But you really have to get diagnosed. You can't just say, I have it and make that sort of like an excuse. Yeah. So the other thing I try to do is advocate for accommodations. In other words, for instance, at the airport, maybe I would get a special order to just go and get it handed to me, the ticket, instead of having to go through the machine and things like that. I mean, in groups of people, I'm terrified and also lost. I'll get into a group and no one pays attention to me. It's just like I'm not there. So I think there's a lot of listeners out there that are very much like that. And it's good to hear that you were able to get much better with the medicine, because I have not. I tried all the medicines. It just persists. They make me real nervous and anxious, and they don't really help. I mean, I'm a little bit more chipper and not as tired maybe, but in the long run, I pay the price of all these side effects. So, I mean, this show has come out, with the plea that people talk about ADHD, because I think a lot of people slip through the cracks. I think a lot of people that are on the street and a lot of people that are in jail, if you trace it down, they have ADHD or dyslexia. So that's really what I'm preaching on this show. And I love to talk about the subject. So it's really good to see that you got helped. Now you have some interesting, I don't know what you would call it. You have some interesting, things about you, that some people might take the wrong way. What I'm talking about is you are, let me see if I can pronounce this right, polyamory? Polyamory?
Yeah, I'm
correct?
polyamorous.
Could you explain to the listener, because I had no idea when I read it what it was about.
Sure. So polyamory is it's a form of, the umbrella term is ethical non-monogamy. And it just means that I have multiple romantic relationships. And
Okay.
a really important word there, because the first question I get all the time is, well, do they know? And my response is yes. It's ethical non-monogamy. Yeah. Everybody knows, everybody consents to the arrangement. I actually, my first polyamorous partner, introduced me to a bunch of his friends, and I started dating some of them. So they've known each other longer than I've known them.
Okay.
To me, it's a way of, it's a way of relating to other people in the most genuine, authentic way possible without closing the door on any opportunities. And that's what I really love about it.
Yeah, because I know I talked about it a little bit with my partner here, and she was like, "Really? I mean, I never heard of that. What is that?" But I mean, I don't think people should judge the actions or the sexual preferences of other people. We have all that about, transvestites and gays, and everybody enjoys doing something. And I don't see any reason why any of it is wrong. I think this country has a real problem of Puritan nature. They really are like, sex is bad. Like, you go to Catholic church, or I did, and they really don't even talk about it. But you know exactly how they feel about it. My son is a pastor, born again Christian, and I'm agnostic. And he, would have a big problem with this, I'm sure, with whatever I do, I don't know, a big problem, but he wouldn't want me to do this polyamory is what I mean. He would be objective to that. I think it's closed-minded. I think the world is turning more into, let's enjoy sex instead of being afraid of it and thinking that it's, you're in the gutter if you do anything off base a little bit, what other people might do. But, I think, all of that should be left to the person, and it should be private. I think we should talk about it as far as get it out there and make sure people know something about it. But it's up to the person. And if everybody agrees, I really don't see, where the issue is. You could argue that it's, not God's way and all that kind of good stuff, but it's something that is the right of a free country to, practice what you want to, as long as you don't flaunt it on somebody or force somebody to do things, or hide that you're doing it. Okay. That's the worst part of cheating on someone, that you lied, that you betrayed them. So I was just wondering though, do you ever notice any form of jealousy where one person would say, oh, you did that with this person. You didn't you didn't go to the baseball game with me, and you went instead with this other guy, and I wanted to go. Is there any kind of jealousy at all in these arrangements?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's just that it doesn't show up in the places where I think people would normally expect. I am thrilled that my partners have other partners, because it means that they have more people to love them and take care of them. I get jealous sometimes. So for example, I have 4 boyfriends, but I live alone. They all live with their other partners. And I had a really bad migraine. Like, I was dead on the couch. I was throwing up. It was a bad scene. And I did feel a little jealousy because I didn't have anyone living with me to take care of me. It wasn't jealousy that meant that I had to do something about it. It just meant, oh, I'm missing this as an opportunity. Jealousy is just information. Jealousy is just a hallmark of an unmet need. And it doesn't need to be a scary thing. It doesn't need to be something that controls you. And that's something that I work on a lot with my polyamorous clients, is accepting that jealousy might happen, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person.
Right. Yeah. I know people in general have, a real insecurity issue with a lot of different things, especially people that have depression or have ADHD. So do you feel that this is just something people get over when they come to this, or do you feel that I think what you're saying is they're jealous, but that's okay? Is that what I hear?
It really depends on the feeling. Like, for me, it was okay that I felt jealous that, I had no one to take care of me while I was really, lying on the couch feeling terrible. For me, that was a feeling that I could handle. For some people, the feeling is so big that they can't handle it, and they need to change something. They need to do something about it. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. I think that it's a matter of balancing, what is appropriate emotional regulation with what is an indication that something's a real problem. And that's not something that I can prescribe. That's something that everyone needs to figure out for themselves. It's, can I live with this feeling? Can I process this feeling? Or is this feeling going to lead to depression or resentment or something that's going to erode my actual relationship?
Yeah, I feel that sometimes I'm fine with it, and then other times I feel a tremendous jealousy. Especially, I think people that are a little bit insecure to begin with, when they find out, oh, you went with him instead of me, it's abandonment issues that I have. And definitely not everybody is ready for something like this. Or, I don't know how popular it will get. I don't want to tell anyone that they can't do something with another person as long as you're not flaunting it. They keep it to themselves. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with anything. If you want to be in a commune like the old communes, okay. But as long as it's not something where one guy is doing something and the other guy doesn't like what he's doing. So that's where I would draw the line. I think it's very honest. Do I condone it? I don't think I have the right to condone it or not condone it. I think America's free. We have rights to do what we want to do. So what's the problem? It's to me, I might get some kickback on this, but to me, I always say live and let live, and don't judge other people unless it's getting in your way. So that's kind of the way I feel. I don't know how other people would react to this. Have you gotten really bad reactions at all from people, like your parents or anything?
My mom knows, and she is totally cool with it. She has met all of my partners. She likes them all. She thinks they're great guys. Let me see. I got disinvited from another podcast interview, actually. And she didn't,
Oh, really?
She didn't specify exactly the reason, but I think it was the polyamory.
Yeah.
And one of my partners actually got almost fully disowned by his parents when they found out. And they didn't so much have a problem with him having another girlfriend. They had a problem with his girlfriend having another partner.
Yeah, of course.
Which
your son is always perfect.
Yeah, which I thought was just a really awful double standard there. But in my general sphere, everyone's been really, really positive about it. For example, one of my partners, his wife is pregnant with twins, and I'm going to be the godmother. And I go over there at least once a week to help out with cleaning, to dog sit when she's going to medical appointments. We are incredibly close friends. And I don't think I ever would have generated that sort of relationship with her if I hadn't also been, dating her husband.
Right. Now, how do you feel that the children will react to something like this? Do you think they'll be confused or just happy to have a lot of people that love them?
I would think the second. I think it's the same with kids who are adopted or kids who have divorced parents. They grow up with a different sort of normal. But in terms of like my role in their lives, I'm going to be their godmother. I'm going to be, kind of like an aunt. I'm just going to be another supportive adult presence in their life. And I think that can only benefit them.
Okay, so if you go over their house and they have 2 5-year-olds, you don't think they would be upset if you were like all over the father?
I think not.
I don't.
I think not if they grew up with that being normal, and like obviously we're going to keep it G-rated when we're around children, like
right. Yeah, you do that anyway. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean nobody does it. Yeah. All right, so that's very interesting. Go ahead. You were to say something?
No, I was just going to say, like, for example, I grew up with my mom dating people because obviously my dad passed when I was 7. So she, she didn't have concurrent boyfriends like I do, but she did have consecutive boyfriends. She would date a guy and then they would break up and then later she would start dating someone else. And so to me, that was normal. And to someone else whose parents have been happily married for 50 years, they might think that that's a bizarre way to be.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of closed-minded people all over the world, but in the U.S. who would say, "Oh, well, I'm going to cancel the interview because I'm not for this," and I'm saying I am not for it or against it. It's just what people do, and I don't think I have the right to tell them what to do. That's as simple as I can make it. Do I approve of it? That's a different story. I mean, I don't think I disapprove, but I know I would be uncomfortable in that kind of situation. So that's just me. So other people are different, and especially younger people. I mean, they grew up in a different time, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, "Oh, that's bad." I mean, is it? I mean, I struggle with it because I was born into a Catholic, family. My parents weren't that religious, but they brought me to Sunday school. I went to church and stuff. And I know they would frown on it, and I know my son would also frown on it. So now, do you find it really difficult, or do you just hang out with people that accept it? As far as getting backlash, other than this one interview, do you get a lot of backlash that say, "Oh, you do that? I'm not going to be your friend, or I won't talk to you"? Do you get any of that?
No. I mean, in terms of the friends I've had since elementary and high school, I've always been weird. So when I say, "Oh, guess what? I'm dating these guys now and they're friends and it's normal for us." The people who've known me for the longest go, "Yeah, that tracks for you. You're kind of an odd duck." And the people that I meet now tend to be also in the polyamorous community. That tends to be a big chunk of my friend network. So,
right. But you don't exclude people. I mean, I know with my son, yeah, he has a tendency like to say, "I'm going to hell" and things like that. He doesn't say it, but all his friends say it. They go, "You got to be born again or you're going to hell." So it's a little bit of an issue, but we see through that where, as long as you have that love bond, you can transcend all of this nonsense and just love each other, which is what you should do anyway. The one thing I did want to mention is you talked about the kink scene. Mm-hmm. Could you define what the kink scene is?
Yeah, sure. That's just the how can I phrase this in like a short way? The scene is just a group of people who are all into kink, and how they define kink might differ wildly, but it's people who connect over the shared experience.
Right. Okay.
Some
that makes
people,
sense.
some people consider polyamory.
Do you like certain types of music? Or, I mean, is there common things that everyone does in that kind of scene? Like, do they go to a certain place? Do they like certain music? Things like that?
There are clubs that are popular, but honestly, it's really just it's not a monolith. It's just sort of a network of people. It's like I had a really good example the other day, and now I can't remember it. Darn you, ADHD.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, I can't remember what I said 2 seconds ago. So, unfortunately, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It appears to get worse with age. I'm 66 now. Yeah, maybe because you have it licked, kind of, it won't affect you, but it's affected me a lot. And the funny thing about it is, I never thought of ADHD as doing something and making me anxious. And, when I talk, I didn't know why I was anxious about talking. And because my family would cut me off. I would say a couple of words and they would go talk right over me. Mm-hmm. So I developed this problem, and I don't think I would have it if I didn't say weird things, didn't communicate well. I think that is the problem. If I don't know ahead of time what I'm going to say, I could just say anything. It's off the wall. People are like looking at me, rolling their eyes. But, there's a lot of people out there, neurodivergent out there, and, we're trying to make it, the world or the United States a better place to live. And I think what's important there is that everyone speak up and say something about this, because we need accommodations. We need maybe to get a ticket at the airport from the person that's behind the counter. All those types. I don't want favors, but I mean, if you're handicapped, you get a handicapped spot. People open the door for you if you're in a wheelchair. This is all I'm saying. There's no empathy. It's like, oh, ADHD, everybody has that. It's no big deal. And I vehemently disagree with that. I really do think if you went through all the people in jail and all the people that are homeless, you'd find a lot of neurodivergent people. And that's unacceptable to me. We have to change it if we can. And, I think you do a great job with that. And I'm glad to see that you healed yourself. Now, is there any links or any books or whatever? Is there anything that you are affiliated with that you would want to talk about?
Sure. I don't have a book yet, but I do have a website, and I offer free half-an-hour confidential consultations. And you can find the links to schedule those at my website, which is just my name with a hyphen. So ANNEKE-ELMHIRST.com.
Okay, and I'll put the links out in the description for everything. You're a great guest. You got a lot of your very interesting life, and you can talk about your recovery as well. And so it's that lady's, she had the problem. You shouldn't consider yourself insulted by anyone that declines you because of that. It's people. What are we going to do about it? Mm. Nothing. We can make laws and things like that, but we just can't change people's minds. It's just not going to happen. So, all right. I really appreciate you taking time out and talking about these issues. And you're a very interesting person, and I hope we talk again.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great time.
All right. Thanks a lot.